Welcome to the Atlas Cast for Building Your Business, presented by best-selling author, speaker, and sales and business growth consultant, Archer Atlas. And here's your host, Archer Atlas.
Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Atlas Cast for Building Your Business, hosted by me, Archer Atlas. Real quick, if you'd like show notes, transcripts for this and every episode, as well as my best-selling book, Build Your Business Without Breaking the Bank, simply go to www.theatlascast.com and subscribe. You'll get all these plus my audio training CD on the Ask approach, going up, how to generate more and better leads quickly and inexpensively. All yours, all free, just for subscribing. Okay, here we are, episode 7, and unbelievably, we're already in September, or as my wife calls it, the most wonderful time of the year. She even starts to sing the Christmas song as the first day of the school year rolls around. Okay, this episode, we're going to continue talking about the Ask approach, picking up where we left off. Okay, so the last episode we covered the opening and talked about why you should always ask for something of your prospect on an Ask approach call. There are a bunch of reasons to do this, but one reason why it's smart to ask for something of your prospect is because you're hopefully providing enormous value to that prospect, and everyone knows there tain't no such thing as free lunch. And it would be at least a little fishy offering something of so much value without asking something in return. Okay, let's go into an example opening and then cover the next steps. Hello, John. Archer Atlas, Atlas Advisors. Reason for the call? I want to send you a white paper on customer reactivation and invite you to a webinar, the 5 most dangerous trends hurting client retention today. Fair enough? All right, let's jump to the chase and say we got a yes to that request off the bat. What comes next? If you're smart, you'll probably want to find out some more information about your prospects to see if they're qualified for what you'll be offering eventually, to possibly determine what you'll offer, to ensure you're talking to someone that's qualified and worth your time, worth going after, and also to possibly seek out some information that may facilitate a sale eventually or on the next interaction with them. Also, and this is actually very important, possibly more important than any qualifying question you may ask, you're probably going to want to ask some reference questions. Questions whose answers you'll use as a reference back to the initial conversation you've had with the prospect, that you can use in future correspondence and interactions with the prospect. Okay, just to quickly recap what we've just quickly covered, when you get a yes to the initial ask of the quote-unquote order, the fair enough question, there are 2 possible types of questions you want to ask: qualifying questions and reference questions. Qualifying questions give you some important answers to whether the prospect is qualified and worth going after, and possibly find out some information that may facilitate a sale. Reference questions are questions whose answers you can reference in the future, in future conversations or correspondence. There is something you can reference to let the prospect know that you are a real person, that you were listening when you spoke last, and that actually you've had a conversation with them, an interaction, and that you're not like everyone else asking them to buy something out of the blue the next time you interact with them. Or you're not just sending them a form letter. You at least know something about them. Okay, quick story on this from my broker days. Well, actually, it's from before that in my lowly cold caller days. Okay, so when I was a cold caller, I'd call up these prospects cold and out of the blue and try to elicit interest out of them and get them excited for the next interaction with an honest-to-God broker who would call them with the firm's next great recommendation, our next winning stock pick. So I'd call these guys, and yes, they were all guys. My senior broker, the one who would pay my salary while I was a cold caller first, and then later an account opener, before I was a real broker myself and on my own, earning commissions. My senior broker then, he had a rule: don't pitch women. He didn't want female clients, and if we're being perfectly honest here, I kept that rule when I worked for myself as a broker. The reasons were pretty simple. In my experience, women made better clients for women brokers than for me, at least. Or maybe it was just women didn't like me as much as they did one of the female brokers I had working for me, who I had handle all the female clients' accounts. It was strictly a business decision, not one made from any sexist viewpoint. Hey, if I figured out that female clients could bring me in more gross, I'd have abandoned men altogether. Consequently, after seeing how well one of my colleagues was doing with Mandarin-speaking clients, I seriously considered learning Chinese. I actually regret having not done that. I don't regret it enough to actually do something about it and actually learn Chinese, but I do regret it somewhat. Anyway, there was one other reason why I didn't pitch women. It was because I was extremely aggressive on the phone, especially when I was trying to open accounts. I would really hammer away at the prospects, relentlessly going after them until either they bought or hung up on me. I just didn't feel right doing that or taking that kind of approach with women. Call me old-fashioned or a misogynist, whatever you like, but something doesn't sit right with me about yelling at women on the phone. And to be honest, that approach is so far from the one I use now, the one I teach now, and what I advocate you or anyone listening to this use. And actually, it's very far away from what actually works the best, bringing in the best results, generating the highest quantity and quality qualified leads that turn into new and better customers and clients, bring in more sales and revenue, and most importantly, more bottom line profits. Okay, enough of that tangent. Let's quickly get back on track. So, I would call up these men and give them the pitch that we went over a few episodes back. One that worked pretty damn well, although today I could see some major improvements it could have benefited from. Okay, here it is, or was, as I should say. Hello, John. Archer over at Stock International. How's the day going? Fantastic. Reason for the call? I represent a full-service brokerage firm here on Wall Street, not a sales call. Just want to introduce myself, send you over some literature, and down the road, run one major recommendation. Fair enough? All right, so there are some gigantic problems with that pitch, such as not offering any real value and not being very clear on what it is exactly that you want the prospect to do. And we'll cover all of that in a bit. But I first want to take a step back right now and let you know one very important thing. This pitch worked, and it worked very well. This exact pitch was responsible for seriously countless amounts of qualified leads generated, thousands of paying clients and opened accounts, and millions of dollars raised. Hell, hundreds of millions of dollars raised, and hundreds of thousands of dollars in commissions, all of which started out from this very pitch. So yes, it worked very well. All right, so let's jump to the yes. Let's say the prospect answered that fair enough question with a yes. This would be the next thing I did or said. Okay, great. Just so we don't waste time in the future, let me ask you. Then I'd ask 2 reference questions, 2 qualifying questions, and then wrap up the call. The reference questions would typically be along these lines. What brokerage firms are you currently working with or have accounts with? And 2, great. Tell me about your last big winner or your last loser. So those 2 questions were reference questions. One or both of the answers to those would be repeated back to the prospect at some point in a future conversation to let them know that a previous conversation had actually happened. In that stock market business, the next conversation would be to get the prospect to open an account by buying a small block of stock. So the opening to that conversation might go like this. Hey John, Archer Atlas getting back to you from Stock International. If you recall, you spoke to a member of my staff briefly about the market, said you were working with Merrill Lynch and you just won big time with Halliburton. See where those 2 answers were referenced? Actually, what would be even more important to reference would be a recap of the closing of the initial conversation. And we'll get back to that in a bit. Okay, so those 2 questions were reference questions. There would be 2 more questions asked in that particular pitch, both qualifying questions. The first would be whether the prospect had 6 figures in the market, and the second was a question that asked if we came to them with a stock idea that they loved and knew would make them money, how much would they put behind it to test the waters with us? Those 2 were qualifying questions. The idea behind each of them was simple. A guy with 6 figures already in the market would be a good and pretty highly qualified prospect to do business with us when we came to them with our next recommendation. And in honesty, most senior brokers only considered a lead to be a qualified lead if they had 6 figures or more in the market already. There's a lot more money to be made selling to people that already buy what you sell than there is in converting virgins. Let me repeat that. There's a lot more money to be made selling to people that already buy what you sell than there is in converting virgins. So it makes sense that the ideal, highly qualified prospect already has 6 figures in the market in that particular business. The last question is the most important. Let me give it to you verbatim. Let's say we come to you with our next recommendation. You loved it. You were 100% confident in it, and the fact that it would bring you 20% returns immediately. How much would you put behind it just to test the waters? This is basically asking, if I bring you something you like, will you be open to buying it from me? This is the most important question. If the guy doesn't answer this question or answers it with nothing, then he isn't a qualified lead. He isn't a lead at all, and he's nothing to you, and he'll never buy. Not to complicate things too much, but once I got on my own and had my own team of cold callers working for me, I actually changed the entire cold calling pitch so that this question was asked first, and then the conversation was closed. And then, lastly, the first 3 questions were asked sort of Columbo style, with 1 foot out the door. Oh, by the way. But let's not overcomplicate things right now. Let's move on with this ask approach pitch. Okay, so you've gotten these 4, or however many you need, questions answered. The next thing to do is wrap this call up. But what's most important here? What's the goal of the call? Well, in the case of this particular pitch we've just gone over, the goal is to 1, elicit interest on the prospect's part, and 2, get them prepared to be called again by someone, a senior broker from the firm. So the close has to accomplish that second one most importantly. The first part, eliciting interest, that's already happened, most likely. If the prospect was still on the phone, they were at least somewhat interested in what we had to say, especially since they first answered positively to that question of fair enough, and then they started answering these qualifying and reference questions. So, they're most likely interested at least a little bit. Alright, so here would be the close of the conversation. Okay, great. Grab a pen and paper. I want you to take this down. My name is Archer Atlas. I'm calling from Stock International. Someone from my firm will be getting back to you within the next few weeks with our next recommendation. All we ask is 2 minutes and that great open ear. Fair enough? So that's the close. Sometimes callers would spell their names out. Sometimes they'd give their number or the website address for the firm. Sometimes, and this is actually a good idea, the caller would verify the prospect's address to send the information over to. I'll send the information we talked about earlier to 123 Main Street. Is that your best address? You could do all or none of that. What's most important is the final question and getting a positive response to it. All I ask is 2 minutes and an open ear. Fair enough? Actually, to correct something I said earlier, this is the most important question. The most important question there is. If this isn't answered positively, you've got nothing out of the call at all. We're going to bring you our next major recommendation. Something special. When we do, all we ask of you is 2 minutes and an open ear. That's all we ask. Does that sound reasonable? Believe me, someone that doesn't say yes to this will not be doing business with you ever. Certainly not on the next call. Okay, there's one last reference question I like to sneak in at the end. Columbo style. While I had 1 foot out the door, so to speak. By the way, for anyone that doesn't know what I'm talking about when I say Columbo style, I'm talking about what? This 1980s TV show called Columbo. It was about this detective that would be known for kind of breaking the case and getting the person being questioned to spill the beans right as he was leaving, walking out the door. Oh, one last thing. And then bam, he'd have the bad guy caught. So Columbo style is kind of asking a final question as an afterthought. To the one being asked the question, at least. It's strategic on your part as the asker, but it appears as an afterthought to the prospect. Alright, so I'd usually ask one more totally weird reference question at the close of the call. Something that would be completely different from anything anyone else would ever ask them. something that would set me apart from everyone else calling them, and something that would allow the prospect to remember exactly who I was. This could be anything. Just make it a little strange and unrelated to anything you've discussed. By the way, let me ask you something. Let's say you and I got into a fight. Who do you think would win? If you could only have one thing to eat for the rest of your life, what would it be? Can you help me settle this argument? If you dropped them off the Empire State Building, what would hit the ground first? A ton of bricks or a ton of feathers? Just nonsensical questions. They serve potentially two purposes. If you could get the prospect to laugh at this question, you may have created some rapport with them, and that could only help next time out. Also, you now have a reference question that really stands out and differentiates you, the asker, from anyone that calls them and asks them anything. This prospect might get a dozen calls a day, and he might tell every one of them that he has an account with Merrill and brag to everyone about the killing he recently made with Halliburton. But nobody else is asking him who'd win in a fight, what they'd choose to eat if they could only eat one thing for the rest of their lives, or what would hit the ground first, a ton of bricks or a ton of feathers. No one's asking them this. So when you bring that up in some future conversation or correspondence, you get instant recall from the prospect. They know you're a real person, and they actually had a conversation with you. All right, we're running out of time here. That's the qualifying questions and the closing. The most important thing to remember is that the most important objective of this conversation is getting the prospect to agree to be open to the idea of having another conversation, and hopefully being open to doing business with you. Next time out, we're going to go through this a bit more and actually talk about everyone's favorite, handling objections and giving good rebuttals. Last order of business here. If you'd like to get transcripts, show notes, and updates delivered to your inbox, then just subscribe at www.theatlascast.com. It's free, easy, and I promise I won't inundate you with emails left and right. Plus, if you subscribe, you'll also get my best-selling book, Build Your Business Without Breaking the Bank, as well as the Going Up, How to Generate More and Better Leads Quickly and Inexpensively audio program, which covers the Ask approach pretty nicely. Just go to www.theatlascast.com. All right, lastly, I'm keeping open last month's offer for a few more days. So, for the next few days only, you can get my latest best-selling video training product, Get More Customers and Clients Now, for only $7. That's it, $7. 93% off by going to www.theatlascast.com/offer. That's theatlascast.com/OFFER. I planned on releasing at least one, if not two more episodes before closing that offer down. But you know what? Life's gotten in the way, and I've been traveling on personal business. So, you can get More Customers and Clients Now, the video training course that covers the Ask approach from top to bottom, right now and for the next few days only, for just $7. Just go to www.theatlascast.com/offer. All right, this ends episode 7 of the Atlas Cast for Building Your Business with me, all-around good guy, fantastic fisherman, and gargantuan golfer, Archer Atlas. Next episode, we'll go over how to handle objections and give great rebuttals. I'm really looking forward to it. See you then.